In 1876, Alicia Gray accidentally created sound using a self-vibrating electromagnetic chip. On that day, the oscillator was born.
Gray, who co-founded the Western Electric Manufacturing Company, was actually working on a telephone prototype when he discovered the electronic oscillator.
In 1920, Leon Theremin invented the theremin, one of the first mass-produced electronic musical instruments. It was a musical instrument you didn't have to touch. Around the same time, Martineau developed the onde Martineau.
A theremin works by generating electromagnetic fields around two antennae. A straight vertical antenna controls the pitch, while a horizontal looped antenna controls volume. The player makes very precise finger and hand movements in the field around the vertical antenna to change pitch and create melodies.
The electronic sackbut was an electronic musical instrument created by the Canadian inventor Hugh LeCaine in 1945. It had a feature which resembles what has now become the modulation wheel on modern synthesizers. It never saw commercial production.
The player used the left hand to modify the sound, while the right hand was used to play the keyboard.
The Clavovox keyboard was a sound synthesizer and sequencer developed by Raymond Scott. In 1952. The first prototype used a theremin module built by young Bob Moog. It allowed for the use of portamento over a 3-octave range.
In 1957, Harry Olson and Herbert Baylor finished the Mark II sound synthesizer. One of the first analog synthesizers. It was acquired by Columbia Princeton Electronic Music Center.
The Mark II consisted of a room-size array of interconnected components, combining sound generators with a music sequencer.
The Mini Moog was a portable analog synthesizer designed by Bob Moog, and it was in production from the years of 1970 to 1981. It was the first affordable portable version of the Moog modular system, and the first Moog that was sold in retail stores. It was an immediate success. Over 1,200 units were made in the 13 years of production. Unfortunately, Moog could not afford to meet the demand and sold the company to Bill Waitena in 1971.
The Mini Moog, or Moog Model D, was the first synthesizer of its kind, being uncomparably more portable than any other synthesizer on the market. It contained 3 VCOs, FM, a 44-note keyboard, pitch bend and mod wheels, CV gate, and was monophonic and monotimbral. In the 1980s, if you wanted your synth to talk to another synth, you had to rely on proprietary technology, and that was really bad. Then, the founder of Roland, Ikutaro Kakahashi, Tom Oberheim, Chet Woods, and Dave Smith decided to develop a plan to unify synthesizers together. At the 1983 NAMM show, Dave Smith demonstrated a connection between the Prophet 600 and a Roland Jupiter. This connection was called MIDI. After a few years, it eventually caught on with the formation in 1984 of the MIDI Manufacturers Association. This became the MIDI 1.0 standard as we knew it for a couple years, but later iterations made small and minor improvements.
In the 1990s, virtual software instruments became more popular and accessible and were able to largely replace more expensive analog hardware. In 1999, an update to the music software Cubase allowed users to run software instruments, including synthesizers, as plugins.
I actually prefer using analog gear despite the vast abundance of digital analog emulation technologies available to me now. You see, the nice thing about analog gear is you have the tactileness that you simply can't reproduce with VST softwares. Most analog synths are still knob per function, which allows for greater user on-the-fly modulation as a performance tool. I also would make the claim that analog synths provide a certain amount of analog warmth that simply cannot be reproduced via natural harmonic distortion modeling algorithms.
Analog.